Hello ladies, MVs and gents. I've wanted to do a couple of videos dealing with some of the aftermath of my video on why Steve shouldn't debate Sargon, and I thought a good place to start would be the confusion between second wave and third wave feminism that Sargon's fans seem to have. Now, a number of Sargon's fans decided to hold up Julie Bindel and her anti-male beliefs as an example of the evils of third wave feminism. The fact that these people haven't done even enough research to know that Julie Bindel is a second wave feminist very much underlines the thrust of my video, that Sargon and his fans not only don't understand feminism, but they don't want to understand it. So I decided to find out if this belief that Julie Bindel is a third wave feminist is coming from Sargon himself, and sure enough it is. Back in September, Sargon did a video called Diversity in Space, in which he said the following.
Julie Bindel, a veteran feminist author for The Guardian, who recently wrote an article about a village where men are banned. Only women are allowed to live in Umoja. Julie Bindel visits the Kenyan village that began as a refuge for survivors of sexual violence and discovers its inhabitants are thriving in the single-sex community. And she really sells it too.
Hardly surprising, she is a political lesbian.
Especially the very last line, which is, Mary shows me a handful of dried beans that she will be cooking soon for dinner. We don't have much, but in Umoja I have everything I need. I suppose in the same way that we have different definitions for the word oppress, we must have different definitions for the word thrive as well. Julie Bindel was also friends with Andrea Dworkin, the famous feminist firebrand.
From the second wave.
Who was her era's
The second wave.
bravest, most galvanizing and polarizing feminist. 10 years after her death, her sheer courage and hatred for the men who hate women continue to inspire. It's interesting that she'd focus on who these men are. They are the men who hate women, not simply what they are, the men. I am sorry to tell everyone that Andrea died 10 years ago this week. She had become famous in the early 1980s for the ordinance that she and the legal scholar Catherine McKinnon had drafted for Minneapolis to recognize pornography as sexual discrimination and a violation of women's civil rights. I think Dworkin can be best summed up by this obituary by Susan Bright, in which she says, that quote about Malcolm X is apt. As Malcolm pointed out, the problem is white people. Dworkin said, the problem is men. Now normally I would say there is some validity to the idiom, you can judge the character of a man by the company he keeps, but we are of course talking about women, and therefore this does not apply. And it certainly doesn't apply to the Radfem Collective.
Second wave feminists.
And their interview with Guardian writer Julie Bindel. They describe Julie as an outspoken journalist, tireless radical feminist activist, and political lesbian. And she's been at the forefront of our No Platforming campaign, which aims to tackle the no platforming of radical feminists by organisations who seek to silence our voices.
A campaign which Sargon supports, see his video defending Germaine Greer.
No platforming will also be the topic of Julie's talk at the Radfems Resist conference, organised by the Radfem Collective, which is taking place in September in central London. Julie's new book, Straight Expectations, examines the gay and lesbian movement in the UK and the ways in which being gay has increasingly come to be seen as no longer a political and personal choice, but something that is biologically predetermined from birth. In the interview below, she talks about the depoliticization of sexuality, the importance of dismantling gender, and her current work surrounding prostitution and its perceptions around the world. So it sounds like we're in for a wild ride, so let's get on and read this interview. So the Radfem Collective asks, what role does political lesbianism play in women's liberation? To which Julie answers, I think political lesbianism has a crucial role, because it tells women that sexuality is political under a system of male supremacy. It tells us that sexual acts are all political, and that none of them are without meaning. And it also clearly defines the fact that equality and meaningful sexual pleasure can be achieved far easier with women than it can be with men under this system. I'm actually really bad at being a political lesbian, so I'm going to have to take her word for that. The Radfem Collective asks, How do we dismantle gender? To which Julie answers, we have to get rid of it. There is no point looking at reforming it. It would be like saying we could reform the Tory party. We just need to abolish and obliterate it. And you know what? We actually know what that's going to look like.
Is Max a girl?
Gender is a social construct.
Being genderqueer with a feminine body. I'm a dude today, come on!
Not a girl, 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 not a fucking girl, not a goddamn motherfucking girl.
But you look like not a girl. But you sound like not a girl.
Now, I'm going to skip ahead a bit here because basically what Sargon shows here is a lengthy montage of genderqueer, trans and non-binary people staunchly declaring themselves as such. Though this is not some attempt to expose Sargon as a transphobe, anyone who hasn't figured that out yet would have to be profoundly dense. The point I'm trying to make here is that Sargon seems to be of the opinion that these people and Julie Bindel are somehow of the same mindset, that they are both pushing in the same direction.
Wait, this is the world that the anti-gender activists like Guardian writer Julie Bindel are fighting for.
If Sargon had bothered to do so much as 5 minutes of research on Julie Bindel, he'd discover that she's a fucking TERF. She is on record as having said, "The mantra now at gay meetings is a tongue-twisting LGBTQI. It is all a bit of an unholy alliance. We have been put in a room together and told to play nicely, but I for one do not wish to be lumped in with an ever-increasing list of folk defined by odd sexual habits or characteristics." That is straight from the horse's mouth. Julie Bindel does not feel nor want any fellowship with genderqueer, trans or non-binary people. Yet here Sargon is saying the exact opposite, that Bindel and this cherry-picked montage of such vloggers are somehow on the same team, trying to bring about the same kind of society. They aren't. You even read this yourself.
How do we dismantle gender? To which Julie answers, we have to get rid of it. There is no point looking at reforming it. It would be like saying we could reform the Tory party. We just need to abolish and obliterate it.
Bindel and company are not looking to reconstruct gender as a spectrum rather than a binary. They're looking to do away with it altogether and purely define people by their biological sex. No distinction between gender and sex, no acknowledgement of the concept of transitioning. Cis men and cis women are the only two types of person in the TERF view of the world. Thinking about it, that's pretty much exactly the view you and yours have, isn't it? I also feel this is a good time to address a video the Amazing Atheist did a couple of years back in response to the blogger Witchwind entitled "Feminists Finally Declare That All Vaginal Sex is Rape." If TJ did his research, which is a laughable notion, let's face it, he'd know that people such as the blogger in question haven't finally admitted this. Such attitudes have existed for decades. Witchwind, like Bindel, is a TERF and a political lesbian, albeit a much more overtly extreme one. She despises intersectionality and certainly isn't by any stretch of the imagination a third-wave feminist. The other person I want to address is this guy called Lasoyo, who recently referred to Jenny McDermott as a third-wave feminist, and also indulged in a little bit of concern trolling, saying she's making third-wave feminism look bad.
This is why people think that third-wave feminism is just like religion, because it is so blind. Now, there are people who have faith who actually do the research and can speak intelligently, but most people are blind to it, and that is exactly what third-wave feminism is. At least those are the third-wave feminists that I've met. Even Steve, again, who I think is an honest-to-God great person, either denies the facts or doesn't look at them when the evidence is presented to him. And you are exactly the same, only you are worse, Kevin. And the reason why I believe that you are worse is because you will let someone be a horrendous person online until they cause such a stir that they are just ran off YouTube, and then all of a sudden you have an issue with them. You tacitly agree with someone, you let them go, you feed into them, and that ultimately is what's going to damage third wave feminism. It's what's going to damage YouTube, and ultimately going to damage your image specifically. And I know that you're not going to listen to me if you even do a video response to this, but that is my opinion, guys.
Jenny McDermott, like Julie Bindel, is a transphobe. She's also a swerve, having made some very rude and dismissive remarks about sex workers. As such, she fits far more into the category of second-wave feminism than she does third-wave feminism. Not that I wish to paint all second-wave feminism with the same brush. Political lesbianism, turfism, swervism, and the majority of exclusionary radical feminisms are extreme mutations of the second wave, but it is the second wave from which they originate. Third wave feminism doesn't allow for these kinds of attitudes because it is fundamentally intersectional, which among other things means it isn't transphobic. I should add, regarding the concern trolling, that I really don't care if movements or philosophies I support look bad. I'm concerned with whether or not they are bad. So in conclusion, second wave feminists aren't third wave feminists. In fact, one of the reasons the third wave came to be was as a response to these exclusionary forms of feminism, such as turfism, political lesbianism, and so on and so forth. In reality, I think the only reason Sargon ever bothered specifying that he is opposed to third wave feminism rather than feminism in general is because he was trying to kiss Christina Hofsummer's ass, given as she calls herself a feminist despite being blatantly opposed to feminism. I also think that for Sargon and company, the term third wave feminist just means feminists they don't like, and that things like feminism, social justice and so on all just mean the same thing. And they are of course wrong. Obviously you can, will and do hate who you hate, but it would at the very least be prudent to admit that your issue is not with just third wave feminism, but rather with feminism in general. Thanks for watching. I'm not optimistic, but I hope you've learned something.